Hey, welcome to the Two Dudes Talk Movies podcast. I'm Cam.
I'm Luke.
And today we have a returning special guest, our favorite teacher ever.
Andrew Britton.
Yes, Mr. Britton. How are you doing this evening?
Great. How are you guys?
I'm
Doing good.
Doing swell.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. This is
Welcome.
exciting. As I was saying earlier, I love podcasts, so to be on one is very exciting.
Not once, but twice.
But twice.
What did we talk about the first time? We talked about...
Evil Dead,
Yes.
because that's what we screened
Last Halloween.
last Halloween.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a recurring theme, right?
Yeah. Once I leave, he's taking it over, so maybe he'll be the Halloween specialist every...
I'm hoping.
I would love that.
I'm hoping. I would love
Nothing
to
would
do
make
it.
me happier.
But if you're new here, and if you don't go to Eastern, would you like to introduce yourself? Who are you? What do you do?
Sure. My name is Drew Britton. I'm a professor in the School of Communication and Journalism, specifically teaching television and video production. And then in terms of the classes I teach, production classes as well as film studies courses. And the two film studies courses that I'm teaching currently are film communication and the branches of horror.
Yes. I think I've taken both.
You have, yes.
I have taken. Watch a lot of movies in there.
That's the idea.
Yeah, it's really it's a bunch of... They're not random. They're just diverse. Because every week you do a different genre, so it's...
Right, and I try not to pick the same film each semester. So if, you've heard from so-and-so, like, oh, I took film comm, hopefully the idea is that when you take the class, whoever it might be, that it will be an entirely new slate of films. Sometimes, occasionally, I'll have like some crossover. But yeah, the idea is, to your point, to pick films that are going to be very diversive and polarizing, so to speak, in which, it's not going to be valuable if everyone comes in and they're like, oh, it was great, because then there's not as much to talk about.
Right.
And personally, for me, I always think the most interesting films are the most,
Well, they're the most diverse.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's fun. I remember... Actually, I don't remember how I first came into your class.
Yeah, I can't remember what film it would have been.
Yeah.
Lord knows.
I know I was quiet at first, as all my classes.
Got to get you out of your shell. Start talking. That's why I say, like, when we're in class, I'm like, come on, you're the critic. Like,
Yeah.
oh, what do you think? Right?
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes it's fun to talk. Sometimes it's not. I don't want to yap too much, as I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
But today we are talking about the 2007, also 2009 film, Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
And this is Mr. Britton's pick. So why did you pick this movie?
Well, I did something a little different this semester for the film comm class, where I had them. I pulled up 3 films that I thought were specific, not necessarily to the holiday, but also to just like the general vibes of the Halloween season. So obviously Halloween was a choice, Scream, and then Trick or Treat. And then, everyone had decided on Trick or Treat. So it was fun. Yeah, did like a little poll and all that stuff. In terms of that film, we'll watch it on Wednesday night. So Tuesday in the film comm class, we'll talk about horror, because that is the topic of the week, the genre of the week. And then we'll watch the film on Wednesday. And then Thursday, we'll talk about the film in relation to the horror genre and basically things that I just prompt them for.
Okay. I guess we can start.
Some general thoughts.
Yeah. Or the plot. You want to do it? I feel like I've been talking a lot. You can do the plot.
Yeah. So the one time that I didn't write down the plot to, I have to ask, but I do remember. So it's a series of multiple interwoven stories where there's one with an old guy who doesn't really care much for Halloween getting attacked by a demon, a group of kids going out trick-or-treating, investigating the school bus massacre over at a rock quarry.
Yeah.
And there's one with this couple that is kind of the intro that leads into some of the other stories and connects back later at the film. There's not as much weight with that one. And then the third one where a group of girls are going out and one of their friends is looking to experience her first time out on Halloween.
But what is that first time? Yes.
Not at all what I thought.
Yeah, again, playing against a lot of the tropes that we are kind of akin to, right? Because obviously that is your first go-to thought, just based off, one, just the way we're kind of conditioned to watch movies, but especially within the confines of like the horror genre. Absolutely. It's a little twist on that kind of old trope, which is always a fun time, right?
Yeah. And I wrote some notes down about those twists, but I want to save those for a little bit later.
Okay. Yeah. We could do general thoughts. I know I call you Drew. I call you a bunch of
That's
names.
fine.
I call you Drew.
Yes, that is fine.
Drew, what'd you think? General thoughts.
one of the things I really love about this film is the atmosphere. And I think it's so important to establish a strong atmosphere, especially in a film like this that revolves around a holiday. Whether that be Christmas or whether that be Halloween. And especially with something like Halloween that is obviously so specific to the season, like you have to hit the foliage and you have to make sure you capture that very specific time of the year. In contrast to something like Halloween. I love it for a number of reasons, and especially the suspense it's unbearable to a certain extent. But they shot it in Pasadena in May.
Okay.
So therefore, it does not look like Halloween in the slightest. Whereas Trick or Treat really did its homework in making sure we felt like we're inhabiting this town in Ohio on Halloween. And I think that's really hard to do. And when a film can do that successfully, like, it makes me love it even more. So yeah, that's kind of one of my favorite takeaways. And yeah, when I say like, oh, I'm going to watch it every Halloween, I think by and large, it's really due to the atmosphere more so than even just the stories, right? Because I watch horror year round, right? So when it gets to the month of October, it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm just going to start watching scary movies. It's really like what inhabits this month better than any film. And honestly, that's Trick or Treat. That's what I always come back to. And that is the one film that I'm always like, oh, when I get to the month of October, I'm excited to watch that because that definitely puts me in the mindset of Halloween and of spooky season, right?
Cam, what did you think?
I feel like I'm gonna have a not as in-depth answer. So
Yeah,
it's like
you kinda set the
terrible
bar really
follow-up.
high for
Yeah,
us.
I'm gonna be like, oh, I like it.
It was good.
Damn, I really don't have anything as deep as that. So,
What was your takeaway then? Like,
I think it was unique as far as storytelling because we don't see a lot of movies where there's multiple storylines happening.
anthology? Yeah.
Yeah. Damn. Okay. It's
But
is that's the name that's called like different.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we don't see it that often, and the one time I do remember seeing it, it was The Devil All the Time. I like how that. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Tom Holland.
Yeah. So
Tom Holland's not in that, is he?
Yeah.
Or which? Wait, Devil All the Time or
The Devil All the Time.
what's the other Devil's one that you watched?
Late Night with the Devil.
Yes, that. Okay, I got it mixed up. Never
Yeah.
mind.
That's The Devil All the Time is like
maybe I haven't seen that one then because I do not recall Tom Holland.
okay.
But anyways, continue.
Yeah, that's like well, you have all those different people, but I didn't like it this much as I did in the Tom Holland one because not all of them came back at the end. Only the beginning opening character and Brian Cox's character.
Correct.
Those are the only ones that came back and connected kind of.
Yeah.
So I wasn't too big of a fan of that. I think I wasn't that big of a fan of the children's storyline with the bus.
Okay.
I don't know, something about that. It wasn't as interesting or entertaining as the other ones.
So what was more interesting or entertaining about the other ones? Because we have, the malicious prank, the Virgin on the Lookout, Old Man Krieg, the Principal with a Secret, and then I guess you wouldn't really consider the opening with Leslie Bibb as kind of that's more just like almost even like cold open, right?
I don't want to say why every single one was better, but I think because they're kids, and I know I've said it a bunch of times. Yeah. I'm not like the biggest fan of children actors.
Yeah,
and that I don't know. It was pretty. It was a really good scenery when they went down. They saw the bus, and I like that storyline when they of how the bus got down there when the parents they paid the guy to go take him somewhere out. That part was interesting, but I don't know. Overall, I think it was just the kids. I didn't
see because I kind of had like a different opinion on that. Where I think that was probably my second favorite of the anthologies that were in this film, because the school bus massacre was like already kind of interesting, like it was kind of intriguing, and then Sam is in the background, and more on him in a little bit, and so like I was already kind of paying attention. I'm like, why is he still here? And basically in the film they explained that there was this school bus full of I don't want to say like mentally impaired, but
special needs.
Yes, special needs maybe kids that were kind of chained up in their seats on a Halloween. They're all dressed up. They're getting candy from the school bus driver. But he took a different route to school, and one of the kids got fed up about it and broke free and drove the bus off the cliff and into the quarry and killed them all, except the bus driver, who mysteriously disappears. Or does he? Right. But I really liked Sam Todd as Rhonda, though, the girl that was dressed up as a witch. Because when she first started off, she was kind of like that classic nerdy stereotype, pointing out like people that were wrong, and giving a little bit of kind of Captain Obvious humor throughout. And so that was kind of charming to see it, because you're going from some of the slasher-ish, more horror killing kind of vibes, and then you get this kind of like lighthearted comedy moments, and it not like exactly reminds me of Goonies, but kind of that lighthearted feeling made me think of that.
Well, it's the idea of like kids on an adventure, right?
Yeah.
They have an objective. The parents aren't around. There's imminent danger, right? Yeah. So very much that similar kind of like Amblin vibe to it, right? Which he definitely doubles down on in his next film, Krampus, which feels like it's right out of the 80s and it feels like it's directly linked to those Amblin films. So I definitely think those vibes are apt for sure.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that one. But I still do think Sam and what's his name, Mr. Krieg, I think that was probably my favorite story to see, because out of all of them, I think that's the one to me that felt like it was the most horror embodiment, sort of. And I don't know if you'll agree with that one or not, Drew. But
yeah, I mean, what's interesting, especially if you are using the Old Man Krieg story, which is our final story, essentially as a continuation of the children on the school bus. It's really sad because, yes, he's a curmudgeon, and maybe it's looking too deep into the movie. It's like, yes, Old Man Krieg is a curmudgeon, and he's really nasty, and he just hates the holiday of Halloween. But it's just like he's dealing with so much like pain and guilt and for the things that he did to these children, right? And so we can really see that kind of eating away at him. And I think that definitely manifests itself in this kind of hatred that he does have for Halloween, which is interesting how it is kind of all packaged in this film that is supposed to be inherently like fun. And so I think what's interesting about that story of the children on the school bus is there's this element of tragedy to it that we don't really get in any of the stories in the film.
Yeah. And that was kind of one of the things that, like, as I was watching it too, because, I guess first off, to spin off what you were saying, what he did to these kids, it's revealed that Mr. Krieg is the school bus driver from the school bus massacre who lived and was kind of getting himself secluded, right? But I do think it was kind of strange to have that one saved for last. I think it made a good twist, but then knowing that it was the most interesting one out of the bunch, I kind of wish a little bit more time was spent on it. But I think I was satisfied with the time we got. Just maybe one or two more scenes would have been nice.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a short film. We're only looking at about 82 minutes. So especially when you're dealing with that in the context of an anthology, right, it just moves. Like, the film's really cooking. So even if you are bored by one story, whether that be one or the other, like, we're quickly moving on to the next one.
Yeah. It felt like a video game. Excuse me. It felt like a video game.
How do you mean?
Have you ever played
do you know the characters in it?
No, but they're like Ashley Tisdale.
They're like what?
Ashley Tisdale's in one of them.
I can't understand what you just said.
Ashley Tisdale. It doesn't matter.
Ashley Tisdale. I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, but there's like these games, and like you switch between different characters, and then you can like kind of tell your own story. Or like each character, you make decisions for the characters, and that goes down the path. I don't know. There's a title for that, but it felt like that. It also has this kind of I guess you say atmosphere as well with it. And I think it was a good point that they put the bus driver at the end. I wasn't upset that he didn't have as much time as the rest of them. I think because we didn't split up from it. We got it with the kids, but then that we kept going back and forth between different stories. But then he was like the final act. So I wasn't like that upset with it.
Yeah. And speaking of split up, Drew, I know we mentioned earlier, can you explain why on HBO Max or Max, when you're looking and streaming, it says the movie was 2009, but IMDb says that it's 2007?
Yeah, so this film has a very sordid past, and I think it's really emblematic of the time in which it came out, especially in 2007. So that was on October 5th, 2007 was when they had the premiere of the film, right? And so if we're looking at it in the context of today, that film would have multiple avenues to go down. It could be on streaming, it could go theatrical, it could do both day and date, especially with considering just the oversaturation we have, especially of like horror content, right? That film, who knows what its history would be today. However, back then, especially at that point in time, we were very much in the trenches of like torture porn, which was a film movement, but not a collective by any means, but it just happened to be that these filmmakers were speaking on these issues of what was happening with the war in Iraq and the war on terror, and kind of commenting on that. So we just really didn't have a lot of movies like this, especially fun horror movies, right? So the film was essentially just kind of set up to die. And so it had this premiere, and their plan was to do a theatrical release. And so Warner Brothers, they just shelved it. And eventually in 2009, they're like, we're just going to dump it online. Actually, at the time, before streaming was what it is today, they just put it on DVD, right? And so that's kind of like the death of a film. And so it's so fascinating to see how this film has basically generated a life since then. And I mean, Sam himself, like he is an icon of Halloween. If you go to Spirit Halloween or any Halloween oriented store, like you see and can buy like figures of Sam. You can buy t-shirts of Trick or Treat or just Sam. So he has become a part of like the cultural like zeitgeist and a part of like the horror subculture. And he is basically and essentially like the mascot for Halloween now. So it's so fascinating, and it's very heartwarming, right?
Yeah.
To kind of see a film generate a life like that. And, you know, Michael Dougherty, the director, has spoken at lengths about this. And he said he made a list essentially of like all the things, you know, basically trying to turn lemons into lemonade. And he said since he's made that list, when the film was essentially dumped in 2009, all those things have started to come true. Like it got a theatrical release and all these other great things that came with it. So it's really fascinating to think about where we were at the time and how the film was treated versus where we're at now and how the film is treated. And it is very, regardless of whether you like the film or not, it is very much celebrated. It's very much a kind of cult film at this point in time. Right, if that film were to come out today, who knows what its lifespan would be? Who knows how people would receive it? But yeah, it's just a matter of, I don't know, at a weird kind of like wrong place, wrong time that essentially kind of morphs into this kind of beautiful story.
And I'm hoping that something similar happens nowadays. It's not a horror movie, but Warner Brothers also shelved a movie and was trying to write it off as a tax write-off, but for Coyote versus Acme, which is like a Looney Tunes movie that was all done, all filmed, all VFX done, and then they shelved it and tried to write it off. And I know there's a few GoFundMe pages that are out there for like restore Coyote versus Acme and stuff. So it makes me sad when studios do that. So I'm hoping maybe something similar happens. But I do agree with what you said with Sam kind of getting that popularity out there. Because to me at first watching through the film, and he was showing up in random spots and then showed up again in a flashback for the school bus massacre, I was kind of taken aback by it. I'm like, shouldn't he be like much younger or like older in the present day? So I was caught off by it. And then the final thing kind of showing that he's this weird pumpkin demon looking thing. Like it made sense to me then why he was kind of there.
He's there to make sure we're following the rules, right? God bless him.
Yeah. And he's definitely my favorite character in the film. I kind of wish that there was more backstory with him too, because I'm like eager to know more about him and like what other kind of stuff he's been up to.
Yeah, and Michael Dougherty has explicitly stated like he will never, like he is the only person that knows of that origin story to Sam and where he comes from. And he's like, I will never tell anybody. And I agree, and I love that, and I love the mystique of Sam and where does he come from? Is he of Celtic origins? Like we just will never know, and that to me that's exciting. But I can certainly see how people are like, no, give me that like the origin story, right? And he's like, we will never get the Sam origin story. Yeah. He is more so just supposed to be this representation of the spirit of Halloween, you know, making sure we follow those rules. But he is definitely, as you kind of alluded to, otherworldly. He is not, he is not of humankind, right? As we see,
Yeah.
obviously, when they pull the burlap sack off of him.
Yeah. And I think that adds to his character a little bit too, not knowing as well. Even though that I would personally like to know more, I think it adds that we don't. Because then whenever he shows up and he's like staring at characters across the street and stuff like that, it makes it all the more creepy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Halloween franchise, referencing Michael Myers, is certainly guilty of that. I mean, what's so brilliant about that first film is the mystique of Michael Myers and who is he, and what's so incredible about the ending of that film is when, you know, Loomis goes to the banister and he looks over and he's gone, and he's out there and he's behind that door. He's he's following you down the street. He is everywhere, right? And especially these new films, which we don't have to get into, and the subsequent sequels, they destroy that notion. And I get it. You have to develop these stories and you're going to run into a wall at some point. But yeah, it starts to really break down what that mystery is and that mystique, and ultimately can ruin it for a lot of people. Right.
I think if we knew what his like origin was, that kind of takes away from his, I guess, the kind of the fan culture with it. Yeah. I think it would. I mean, like, I can't say it definitely happened, but truth be told, I didn't even know this. I don't know. I've never seen like any pop culture things with Sam.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, if you like Google like Sam trick or treat merchandise, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cool. I don't know. I mean, I thought I was in the movies, but clearly I'm not as much as I thought I was because I didn't know who he was before.
Well, I mean, that's what we were just saying earlier. Though it's a cult film, right?
Yeah.
So like, yeah, it's not going to have the kind of cachet and word of mouth that like a Marvel film would have, right?
Yeah.
But rather, it is special to a small group of people, especially within the horror subculture.
That's right.
Absolutely, that have kind of like latched onto it and ran with it, right? Mm-hmm. Just as they have a number of other icons, whether it be Michael or Freddy or Jason.
Yeah. What are we thinking of acting performances?
You know, I absolutely love Dylan Baker, who plays the principal. With the deadly secret. I think all of his interactions, especially this kind of just pure hatred he has towards children, which is really rich. And of course with Brian Cox as Mr. Krieg, I think there's something really interesting about a lot of the groundedness and the performances of the actors in the film, which I think is interesting in the context of a film that is so outlandish and absurd in a lot of ways. Even when Mr. Krieg is battling Sam at the end, like it really feels like he's playing it. He's not playing into the joke, right? He's playing it as serious as anyone would in that kind of situation, regardless of the fact that the tone of the film is a little bit more lighthearted, right? And we had talked a little bit about that earlier, about kind of how there's this like tragedy element woven into the story about the children and the bus driver, right? And I think the reason a lot of those moments work are because of the performances of like Mr. Krieg as well as Dylan Baker's character, right? And I think that goes for everyone. Like, I mean, we have a great cast. You have Leslie Bibb, Dylan Baker, Anna Paquin, and Brian Cox, right? Those are massive heavy hitters who have been around for a long time. And so I can't remember who had stated, but was that you that stated you're not a fan of children in films? Yeah, because I feel that way about like more so like high school students, just because it is so far removed from like my experience that it's just hard for me to relate to it. Is that how you feel about watching like children in films, or is it more so you just don't like watching like children actors regardless?
I think it's children actors, but I know I'll give praise when it's due. What's a recent child?
I don't know if it counts as child or not, but the new Percy Jackson series that was on Disney Plus is kind of like preteen teenagers-ish for actors.
Didn't see it.
No, I thought it was good.
I don't know. I guess I don't really. Oh, I saw I saw the TV Glow. It's kind of like high school too. Have you seen it?
I have not yet.
Have you seen it?
I need to. It's on my watch list.
I don't like children. Like if you're under high school, I don't really like it.
I feel like, and that's probably not dissimilar from what I'm talking about. Just like you are so far removed from that now. It's just like, is there any kind of relatability in that?
As to like why? Or
yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Like,
I don't know.
I don't know if that was the reason, but
I think because one, I don't like kids. Two, it's I think they're acting too much. Like they're going out of their way to really prove a point that like, hey, I can act, and I know that's what you're supposed to do, so you can get that next role. But I think it's because you're a child. It's I don't know. I think I think of like the force of parents, like, hey, go do this thing. Like I don't even know if kids want to act. I just feel like their parents told me to go do something, and then they just got picked up. And I don't know, something about kids. And my mom doesn't like it. Like we barely watched children stuff. Like I didn't watch a lot of the Disney movies, like High School Musical and all the Disney shows. I didn't watch them.
Yeah.
But I think that's why I don't like kids in movies.
Well, it's become such a trope now in the genre, like putting children in peril, right? And so we've seen it time and time again, especially with the King Renaissance we've had since Chapter 1 came out.
It?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's good. That has a story. I liked it for some reason.
It's because they put so much care and attention into who these kids are. They're not relying on the trope of like, oh, kids in peril, therefore it's automatically scary, because that is scary, right? They take the time to make us actually care and actually have scenes where the children aren't just talking about Pennywise and how they're going to confront the situation, but more so in dealing with friendship. And so I think that's one, because I'm in the same boat where it's hard for me to, or not hard for me, but I just don't really enjoy watching a lot of horror films, especially with children in them. And I think it is an exception because of all those reasons and all the care and attention they put into it. And obviously that's just an extension of Stephen King as well, and coming from the novels.
I think having the history with it and the great director with it, and I think Stranger Things had already come out, so I was familiar with one of them. And I think it was at a time where I didn't like children in movies, so I was going off. I forget the guy's name. He's in Stranger Things. I think his name's Mike. He's in the band Calpurnia.
Oh,
but
I know who you're talking about, but I'm blanking on his name too.
It's whatever. Stranger Things said. Yeah. But you got it.
I feel like an outlier between the two of you on that, because I'm not as like turned off by the idea of kids being in like horror films and stuff like that, or just films in general. Because to me, if you can bring a good performance and you're doing it well, then kind of like you said, credit where it's due. But regardless of if you're a kid actor or not, if you are just kind of doing it to overdo it or put your name out there a little bit too much, then I'm going to be like taken out of that immersion from it and be like, I can visibly see that you're trying to act, not that you are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I said it like that. Like something else to say.
But I do have another thing I would like to talk about too.
Yeah.
Is the twists in this movie. I was pleasantly surprised. So like watching through it, all these anthology stories that are in the film are interwoven, and there's little time cuts that you'll get the longer that you watch to help set in stone this story takes place, then this follows, this follows.
Right.
But to then tie the stories with characters in between them was really, really good. And it started off where, and this is not going to be in order of events, but in order of the twists that happen. I hope I have them right. But the first one was Steven, who is the school principal, and his whole secret deal was that he had a bunch of kids' bodies like in his backyard, digging, throwing them up and whatnot. And later in the group of girls that are all dressed as Disney princesses and looking for their first time, the one that's looking for her first time is confronted by this dude in like a black robe and hood and mask thing and has vampire teeth on and is going around kissing people like on their necks and like across their body and stuff. But as he's doing that, the vampire teeth are like biting into them, making them all bloody and killing them slowly and whatnot. And at first I was already kind of like interested because, that's horror-ish. Like I'm interested. And then later you get to this camp of girls following the girl who's looking for her first time, which is Anna Paquin as Lori. And you're following Lori, she gets there. And as she's walking, she decides to take a separate way to get to the camp than her friends do. And along the way, this hooded figure with the teeth shows up, and it's Steven after he gets unmasked. And I was like, oh, hey, that's him. Like, this story and this story are connected. They make more sense. They flow a little bit better together now. But then the strangest thing out of the world happens, and I could not have predicted it, but whenever they keep saying first time, I'm thinking that she wants to have sex for the first time. But they turn into this like werewolf sex demon thingy and like tear him to shreds.
Right.
And it caught me so off guard, but it was like such a good twist. I'm like, I never would have thought of that. And the twists only kept getting better. And like, I guess in that same scene too, seeing a hot dog costume that was empty roll across the floor kind of excited me. Because if you follow me on Instagram, for my username is Glizzy Nerd, and I have my own hot dog costume, I thought that was kind of funny.
Nice.
But
it was a callback to you.
Yeah, I hope not. I don't want to be devoured by those things. But then the twist kept getting bigger, because after this, it goes into the Mr. Krieg story where you find out that he was the bus driver from the school bus massacre, tying back into the kids' story. So then now that after the film ends, you have this clearer picture of how the events of Halloween night unfolded and who was where when, and how these characters impact each other's stories from being there. And at the end of Mr. Krieg, Sam is staring up at the stairs, but when this lady and her I think fiance or husband, I don't remember if they're married or not. Yeah. But she extinguishes the pumpkin still, and it's still Halloween. And then that leads into the first scene in the movie where Sam goes and basically just butchers the girl and puts her heads up on stakes and like uses the metal thing and pulls her mouth open.
A sucker. Yeah.
Yeah. It was all really well done, I feel.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. So was that the reveal of the werewolves? Was that a shock to you? And this leads to my other question, did you feel like, so one of the things I wanted to talk about with this film was like the reality in which the film takes place. So when we got to that part with the werewolves, up to that point, did you feel like the reality of the film was no different than our own in terms of like the rules and basically the rules that in which the film plays by, in that, you know, everything is grounded, everything is very realistic, because at that point we haven't really had a lot of these supernatural elements, right? Or these kind of mythic elements of like werewolves and just like kind of more so the spirituality of Halloween that we really don't get until, especially in that second half of the film, once Sam really becomes more of a prominent character. So was that part of the reason why it maybe felt like a shock of like, oh, all of a sudden the rules of this reality are out the window? Because leading up to that point, it was so grounded. It was like, oh, I'm looking for my first time. So we're almost scared for her, right? Because there's this element of like vulnerability to her, because we are led to believe that she is this innocent little virgin, right? Until she devours this character, right?
I would say so. I think up until that point, the only times that anything kind of more mystical happened was when I noticed Sam showing up in the school bus massacre flashback. Because when he shows up earlier, I'm like, I don't know. Nobody knows if you're watching the first time that it's this pumpkin demon little kid thing.
Could be a kid in a costume.
Right. Yeah. And so then seeing him again during this flashback, I was kind of like taken aback. I was like, surely he should be younger or not there. Right. So I was curious about that, but I didn't pay as much attention to it. And then the school bus massacre kids do show up, I think, beforehand, but it was kind of like this ghoulish type thing, and it kind of fit the theme of that specific story, so I didn't mind it as much. But then getting to the point where these sex demon werewolf thingamabobs roll up, that part was kind of a little jarring, and I think it do shock me, because while everything, like you said, is grounded, that one was maybe more mystical than the others. I don't know if mystical is the right word, but kind of out there.
Yeah,
I guess
mythic.
More so.
Yeah. Yeah, there's more kind of like lore to it, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think I don't think this shock did a lot for me, because if we have a twist, it would only get me if it was grounded, or if I'm invested with it for a long period of time. And because we have so many different stories to keep up with, I'm not as connected to these characters, because I'm always if they were all in the same area at the same time, then I'd be more invested, because they come, I don't know, they're in the same environment, same unit. I mean, obviously in the same universe, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I guess because we're not invested with them for a long time, the twist didn't really matter to me. Because I remember watching it and just sitting there, and now that we're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, they did turn into a werewolf, but I was just so, I don't know, so focused on so many different ideas and characters and how we're gonna end here and all that good stuff.
Like your attention was split too much, kind of?
I guess so. But I guess you could say that about any movie at the same time.
That's true.
But that's difficult with an anthology, though, is because we only are spending so much time with certain characters, and that is a huge feat to tackle of making us connected to these characters. And I ultimately think they do a good job, like Rhonda, especially like I empathize with her, like I sympathize for her. And I think that is supposed to be a moment of kind of vengeance when, it is supposed to be a moment of vengeance, but we are supposed to ultimately cheer for that vengeance because we have sided with her, essentially because she's been bullied up to this point. And so I think that is a testament to the direction and the writing in getting us, depending on how you might feel, obviously, right? But at least for my case, getting us to feel certain things for certain characters, right? And obviously some more than others, like the Rhonda character, as well as we might not have sympathy for Mr. Krieg, but when finding out the reason, by and large, kind of the reason he acts the way he acts, we have a sense of like understanding for what that is.
I also don't. I'm terrible with trying to guess twists and turns in plots or whatever. So I never think too far. I try not to think too far ahead in movies because one, I already know I'm going to get it wrong, and two, that kind of takes away from what's going on at the moment.
Yeah.
So that werewolf thing, obviously we weren't expecting it, but I don't know, I didn't even think of a turn to happen.
Yeah,
I didn't either.
I wouldn't even consider those twists and turns. I would just consider them like discoveries.
Okay.
Whereas like I would consider like a twist in a film is when the filmmakers and the narrative is very consciously trying to make you and direct you to believe this certain thing, and then kind of pulling the rug out from underneath you and kind of saying like, actually, this is how it's done. Whereas the film doesn't really lead us to believe a certain thing before pulling the rug out from underneath us. It's more so just like, oh, we are making discoveries. Even kind of like the virginal like element. Like I wouldn't even call that a shock because they never directly say like, oh, it's to have sex. It's more so our conditioning and how we watch movies, especially within the tropes of horror. So it's kind of that fun discovery of like, oh, that's what they meant by the first time, right? Foolish me, because, I've seen that trope so many times in films. I didn't give the film enough credit to do something interesting because I've seen that so many times. I was just expecting it, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting difference between the two there with the twists and discoveries that I've not thought about before for any film.
I'd agree with you. Not that I get what you're saying when it makes sense, and I also wouldn't call it twist after you say it because they didn't. I'm thinking of other movies where there's twists and they know what they're doing. Like the first thing that came to mind was like Gone Girl or like Shutter Island or something like that, and they're I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a more vivid memory of Gone Girl for sure. But even at that, like that's more so the perspective in which it's told from. Like we are seeing it from Nick's perspective, right?
How do you remember these people's names? I couldn't tell you. I could not tell you anyone's name ever.
And then when we get to part 2, it's now told from a different perspective, right? So it's not even so much a twist. It's just like, oh, we are discovering these things because we are just changing perspectives. We just never got that information up to the point of part 2 because we just hadn't had that perspective from the person telling it, which was, I can't remember her name, but it's Rosamund Pike's character, right? So when it just hard cuts and all of a sudden she's giving the quote unquote cool girl monologue, right? It's like, okay, we are discovering this because we are now getting it from the person who has that vantage point and who has that perspective on these elements of the story that we just haven't been aware of because it's all been told from Nick's perspective and he has been in the dark, right? Because he has no clue the wool she's pulling over his eyes. Sorry, I know we're getting off track. I'm starting to go into the Gone Girl podcast.
Well, gentlemen, is there anything else we think we should talk about before we move on to ratings?
I don't think so.
Yeah, what do you got?
I don't think I have anything.
Drew, do you have anything else you would like to add before ratings?
Yeah, so I definitely wanted to talk, which we did, about the atmosphere and then kind of the reality of the film. I think we had talked enough about. I think.
Well, then let me ask you, what would you rate this movie?
Out of 5.
Out of 5.
Yeah, I don't like doing ratings.
Really?
Yeah, if you follow me on Letterboxd, I never rate the films, but that's a whole other podcast. but I would say solely for the sake of its atmosphere and the way it encapsulates the season of Halloween. It's got to be a 5 out of 5. I don't think any film captures the spirit and the essence of Halloween better than this film does. And for me, it is always the Halloween staple. It is when the month of October comes around. That is first and foremost the film. It's like, gotta watch this because of everything it represents.
I think you, EJ, and Brooke all gave your movies 5s.
I'm pretty sure you guys did, yeah.
I think you guys all gave it 5s.
Cam, what did you think? What would you rate this?
I don't know. I wasn't really feeling it. I don't know if I articulated that well this podcast, but
did it have enough polish for you?
No, it's not that. No, it's just I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe Do you think maybe it's like part of what you're saying with like the kids, like you don't have the ability to relate so much with it, maybe?
No, because that wasn't a major part of the story. Like I know it was a section, but I think maybe because I wasn't interested enough. The acting wasn't that impressive to me. I like Brian Cox's character, and I liked the principal as well. I think because they're the most matured and they have the most. Brian Cox had the most experience, and he had to fight with Sam, so that was cool. And he's old. And the principal, we started with him, so I was already there off the jump. But something about it, I just didn't really care about how everyone ended up. And I think the main part was there's too many characters I'm supposed to care about that at the end I don't care about any of them at all. I think that's what it is.
I can understand that.
So let me ask you this. Why is caring about the characters important to you?
It's not that important. I know we talked about this in class a couple weeks ago.
All the time.
Yeah, and can you repeat the question? Why is it important to me?
Is it important? Yeah. And why is it important to have to like a character and feel like you want to follow them on that journey?
It's not necessarily that I have to like them, but because they're so spread out and they're not on the same kind of mission. I think that's the part that lost me. Okay. And I think also because I've just been watching a lot of horror or like Halloween scary movies. Yeah. Like I think these are some of the few movies I've seen this month in October. That might be just oversaturated with it this month.
Do you feel like, is it important? So going off that question, because I'm trying to like really pinpoint what you're getting at here.
Okay. Yeah, I'm probably not explaining
that's
it well.
Okay. No, I'm just curious. For the sake of discussion, is it important for you for your characters to have like an objective, like we are going from A to B, or like this character has a goal in mind?
No, I don't need to. No, I think it's just this movie. The teenagers, I didn't really care. They're also part of that younger crowd.
You're talking about the girls, the werewolves?
Yeah. Okay. Didn't care about that. You got the kids. Yeah, I think that's what, if a bulk of the characters I just didn't care about. Yeah. But it's also a thing I don't care about characters. Like, I don't need to like you at the same time. So
So if you had to rate it then, what would you say? Out of 5.
Give me a 2.5, I think.
2.5?
Yeah. That's the lowest I've rated something.
A little subpar.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I can go back to it. Sorry, Drew.
That's okay.
I'm sure you couldn't care less. But Luke, what are you thinking?
For me, I'm a little bit of the opposite of you. I don't relate with these characters as much, but I don't know if I'd say I care, but I like the journey that they take. Mm-hmm. Because instead of having that traditional ending where, each character just get their storylines wrapped up, I guess, in a nice little bow and you get to move on with your day. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The ending goes back to the first film. Right. So it's almost this closed loop with some tangled lines in between. And I think that's a nice cycle to feed it to allow some rewatchability. I do like some of the actors, not all of them. I'm not a huge fan of most of the group of girls, but Paquin, I do like her character. Brian Cox is obviously great. And the dude who plays Steven, whose name I'm blanking on, I like him too.
Yeah, Dylan Baker.
Yes, Dylan Baker. I liked him.
He's in an excellent film called Happiness, which you should check out. A very different type of horror.
Yeah, and I wasn't thinking as much about the atmosphere of the movie, and I think maybe that's kind of tying in what you said about being conditioned to the way we watch films, where if you know it's a Halloween movie, you just expect that it's taking place on Halloween, and you're not really analyzing that thing. And I think that's kind of my fault with it, where I didn't really think to analyze that. I just knew that it was on Halloween, saw the decorations, and I'm like, yeah, it's fitting, and didn't think about it comparing it to other films. I do wish there was some more time spent with a few of the characters, namely Sam, but I think it's good that we didn't get some of that to allow that kind of cult following and publicity for them to get out in the mainstream. Yeah, for me, I think I would give it a 3.5. I think it's good. So
cool.
Weird enough, this movie came out in December.
Interesting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole other discussion too. This idea and this tradition of a number of horror films not coming out, especially if they are themed around a certain holiday. Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you look back, like there were a number of like Halloween, like the Michael Myers films, like that were released in August, which is just absolute insanity to me. Yeah. But yeah,
I don't know. $12 million budget. It's pretty cool.
And yeah, and I think to what we were talking about, the money's on screen, right? Like you see where the money went, and you see that a lot of it was to encapsulate this aura and this vibe of Halloween. And that is unfortunately one of the reasons why the original Halloween doesn't probably have that atmosphere. They only had a $300,000 budget. They were painting leaves and then, picking them up and putting them in trash bags, right? So they just didn't have the means to do so, right? Whereas it's more upsetting, like when the new Halloweens come out and it's just like you have all the means in the world and it doesn't have that atmosphere, right? But, whatever.
Well, Mr. Britton, Drew, AB.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on, man, for the second time. Maybe it'll be a tradition for you.
I would love to do it as a tradition if you're down.
Yeah, for sure. I'm happy to.
But yeah, this has been the Two Dudes Talk Movies podcast. I'm Cam.
I'm Luke.
Drew.
Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Thanks for keeping up with all the Halloween themed episodes. I know we've been doing horror for a minute, but we're going back to the regular episodes for the month of November. Maybe we'll do some in December for festive stuff.
I don't know how long we have in December because I know we have a break.
Yeah,
but
I don't know.
We'll figure that out.
What's the next film?
What's the next film?
Yeah, you got to prompt your listeners, right? What's the next film?
Next film is Ready Player One.
Okay.
So,
and we will have another guest for that.
Who is it?
You know Alexis Moore Jones?
Yeah.
I just said her full government, but yeah, Alexis Moore Jones. We have a list of we have guests for like the rest of the year. So
oh, cool.
That'd be pretty cool.
Except maybe one or two.
Yeah, except maybe like 1 week in November.
What are the rest of the films? Or do you not
You'll
know?
just have to tune in and watch.
Okay. Yeah, I can't give out all the surprises.
Well,
we can't give out all our secrets.
Hey, I'm
yet.
following it on Apple Podcasts, so it's right there with all the other podcasts.
Yeah. And we are also on Spotify and YouTube.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Yes. So we'll see you next week. Bye.
Peace.